Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today I'm joined by Adam from the Army Painter to get an idea of everything that's been going on, for it has been a busy few years. So it's great to have you with us on the channel today, Adam.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So before we get into what the Army Painter's been up to, I'd like to find out a bit about yourself. How did you end up in the hobby, and then how did you end up with the Army Painter?
The hobby's a long story, and it's one some people have heard me say over and over again. But basically, I was visiting some cousins in upstate New York at the time, and we were reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings over the summer, and we built Middle-earth out of Lego. And we had to go to the mall with his dad, I believe it was, and we walked in, there was a workshop store, and we like ran right up to the window, and there were elves and there were orcs and there were humans, and we're like, this is what we should be doing. And this is pre Games Workshop having the Middle-earth license.
Yeah.
So it was just fantasy, old world now. And we'd paint models because we lived apart from each other. I was living in Philadelphia and then Ohio. And, we'd visit for the holidays and show each other what we painted, and that was it. But we never played a game. And, sort of dabbled in it throughout high school and college, university. And then I was on a bike ride, and I worked in the bike industry prior to coming to the hobby industry. And I was on a ride, and it was one of those long rides where you're just knackered and you want to have a couple beers and go for a swim on a hot day. And a friend had one of those pool noodles, and he carried it like a joust. And as he drunkenly jumped off the deck of the pool into the pool, he yelled that he was a Bretonian knight. And like, as he's underwater, it was like I could hear the record scratch. And I was like, hold on, what did you just say? And the next day I went to a hobby store, bought some paints and models. That was 15 years ago or so. And here I am. I was working for another paint vendor, and I ran into this beautiful booth at a distributor trade show. And there was this tall Dane, standing in the booth looking me up and down. I reached out and shook his hand. That would be Bo Penstoff, the founder and former CEO. I think his new title is Creative Wizard, but I think he gave that to himself, so I'm not sure if it counts.
Oh, I don't know. I think it does. It's like the Obama meme, putting the medal around your own neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But,
It's interesting then that a lot of people, when they start to get into the industry, they generally come from within another adjunct part of it, I suppose. So it's one of these things where we become very nebulous or cyclical. People move in and out of different parts of the industry, and they bounce around.
I like to say incestuous, but some people don't like that.
That's all right. I'm from Northern Ireland. We're very au fait with the term. But when you joined the Army Painter, then how long ago was that?
So I believe that this April or May will officially be my 6 years with the company. And there was some months leading up to it before it was official. I think legally I've only been with the company for 2 years, contractually for the past 6, because we just started our U.S. business a couple years ago, and which has been cool to see grow, because now we have more employees over here in the U.S. and helping with the events team and social media and things like that. So I would say 6 years is coming up.
So you've seen quite a big development then from when you started with the Army Painter into what it is today. Obviously, it was, I think the colored sprays were about, the range was much smaller. Dip was a thing of glorious mystery.
One. Yeah, it still is.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I think I used to tell people that I was the 17th employee, but Bo came and actually visited me before Adepticon, and he said I was number 11. So going from 11 and then, the growth that we had, and we always were steadily growing. And then a couple years ago, things just kind of went off the launch pad for us. And so I've been a part of the recent growth, but for some reason, I feel like I've been here since 2007. I think it's just kind of the Army Painter way. Once you get to know Bo and, his co-founder and the rest of the team, they really bring you in and make you feel the history of the company and understand not just, what we do and how we do it, but why we do it, and I try and translate that every day with my team now. And because when you feel like you're a part of something that's been around longer than you walk a bit more confidently in the way that you do things, and you speak a lot more confidently to those that are following you.
So with obviously a Danish company, and then the US side has sort of blossomed over the past few years. How was that working across continents and time zones, and going from a very small team where presumably a lot of what you were having to do was tied directly to the guys in Europe, and then now where there's a larger team in the US, is there sort of more autonomy there, or is it still very interconnected?
It's extremely interconnected. I mean, we only hired we only have 3 other Americans on the team at the moment. And they're very focused in what they do, but it did require waking up early. Earlier on, I was kind of a lone wolf in the company, and they hired me to do consumer outreach through social media and events, and then realized, oh, maybe we can use him in sales. He's pretty okay at that. So I was doing kind of like towing the line between trade sales and marketing, with my toes just into product development at that time. And it's what I do today is 2 days a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I have my meetings with my team, and I try and be always available for them. And then I stagger my meetings with my team here after, and once a month we try and get them all on a call. So I'm somebody who's worked from home for a long time, like well before COVID started. I've been a remote employee, so it was kind of natural for me. I had young kids, still have young kids, so I'm used to being up early. And I'm there 4 to 5 times a year, so it's the interpersonal, face-to-face connection, communications. We get to buff that up every time I'm over there.
It's always fun. Meeting those are always hilarious.
Yeah.
Sometimes people come away sober. Not often. So speaking about product development then, and COVID to a greater or lesser extent, that was a period in the industry when a lot of things stagnated. A lot of companies sort of stopped dead for 1 or 2 years, while everything happened around them. And then we're playing massive catch up essentially afterwards. It didn't really happen that way with the Army Painter. It seemed like it was one of the most cataclysmic upheavals of the range, all came within that period. I'm assuming that is simply because of the length of time it takes to get into production, and these things had already been set in motion in advance. But do you want to talk us through what that was like?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple levels to it, Gerry. At the Army Painter, when I came on board, we were always very strong at retail and through distribution. We have a history of understanding retail because Jonas was a retailer. Michael used to be a store runner. Bo used to help set up a lot of the retail and did trade sales for Workshop back in the day. So they understood how important brick and mortar retailers were to the community and how to serve them. I say this and used to say this, kind of coined this at the company when I was doing trade sales. The hardest bottle of paint for a retailer to sell is one that they can't keep in stock. We, at our busiest times of year, our fill rates are 98.7%, which is kind of insane. And when the world shut down, I remember having a call with Bo, and he didn't know what was going to happen. None of us knew what was going to happen. And Bo knew that he wanted to make sure that, his employees had work first and foremost, were able to earn a living. And there was a time period and like a burn rate, and they said, we know that we can get this far but we don't know what happens after that. So let's see how we can handle this. And it did shut down. I can't remember how long. I mean, it felt like forever that the orders stopped coming in, not the direct orders through our website, but the big orders from our distribution partners. And that's a scary proposition, right? And we were just then tooling up to add our second, basically double our manufacturing output. And we had this brand new shiny machine come in, and Bo said, "You know what? I have an idea." And sometimes that's a crazy idea. Sometimes it's a really smart idea. Sometimes it's both. And I think this was one of those where it's both. He called up a friend who was a distiller and said, "I want to make proper hand sanitizer. And we're going to give it to the schools. We're going to give it to the nursing homes. We're going to give it to the first responders and the local governments and municipalities." We ended up giving millions of bottles to retail stores and events as things started to open back up. So that the first things that machine tapped was hand sanitizer. And we kind of made a post on Facebook saying, bear with us, but this is what we're doing for a little while. And it was maybe to this day, other than our 100,000 subscriber video on YouTube, was the biggest thing we ever did. But the funny thing is, very soon after, we started getting the orders again from distribution. And we were one of the only paint manufacturers that was able to cater to the demand because, we all heard this story. People are back at home, refinding their old hobbies, sharing it with their children because they are, our age. We have kids now, maybe a little bit more money in the pocketbook. And so there was this resurgence. But the truth is, yes, we were able to produce, and that's one area where we were able to kind of gain ground from the marketplace perspective. But the truth is, we were always growing. Ever since I started with this company, there was steady growth. It surged and has still been going, which is amazing. And we keep kind of wondering when we're going to hit that ceiling.
Yeah.
But I don't think this industry or community is done growing. I think that we see more people coming over from video games and mainstream nerddom that are finding tabletop gaming and enjoying miniature painting. I like to say thank Big Bang Theory, Marvel, Stranger Things,
Sure.
Star Wars, because it's cool to be a nerd. And
yeah, it's been a long time coming.
It has been, right?
Yeah.
Right. But
it's one of those things where people often think, especially when they've been in the hobby for a while, and they maybe look at like the big header, like Games Workshop, or look at Dungeons and Dragons and just how massive they are. But then when you look at the sort of the gaming industry and video games in particular, or even just board games, not miniature side, we are a niche of a niche of a niche. And there's still so much room where people could get involved and people can expand. Whereas, you're not looking at a Warcraft sort of thing where 14 million people are involved.
Right.
We're a small fraction of that. So there's always new blood coming into the hobby, which is good. And it's reaching out to them in various ways is always important, and trying to find those new avenues, I suppose, to encourage them to get in.
We call that recruitment. It's you have, we just got back from Adepticon, and that is the biggest tabletop gaming focused event that I've been to. You have Gen Con, which is massive. It dwarfs Adepticon, but that's all gaming, as you said, and you go to these events, whether it's Gen Con or Comic Con, or, I know DreamHack is showing some interest in tabletop, and that's an opportunity. You already have something in common with that person. It might not be direct, as you said, because it's a niche, but we all kind of exist on the fringes. We like to play games, whether we like these fantasy and sci-fi worlds, whether it's through a console, PC, your Xbox, PlayStation,
sure,
or your comic books, cards, and miniatures, so we have that one thing in common. We have the ability to reach out and say, here's something that you can also enjoy that, is kind of in the periphery of or directly tied to your hobby. That's the thing with D&D. When we had the license for D&D, we realized that there's so many people that play the game but don't necessarily paint. And, you know, we felt like it was our job to go out and teach them that this is another part of your D&D hobby that you can also enjoy with your friends and your party, or by yourself, or with your family. And that was a fun little ride that we went on there.
And then I suppose it leads back to things like the Game Master range then. Which,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, is something that's been slowly expanding and has introduced not just the paint side, but also terrain crafting as well for the tabletop. And like I said, a lot of people possibly don't realize that or don't explore that sort of avenue. Whose idea was that then?
Oh, that was Bo's 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And you know what? I think that initial core set was way ahead of its time. Because people see it and they're like, I don't know what this is. But really what it was, it's taking all the things that you would go to like a craft store or a scale hobby store or your local hardware store, you know, foam and wire cutters and et cetera, putting it in one box and saying, okay, go make your dungeon tile system, or go make a building for your next campaign. It's really fun. Basically, the first time I met Thomas, who's our lead studio painter and product developer, Bo had sat him down and he said, Adam, go sit with him, and said, here's a bunch of foam, here's a hot wire cutter, here's some glue, make some stuff. Let's see what we can do with this. You know, and of course, you know, it then came the water-based, you know, foam safes, you know, primers and terrain primers and things like that. It's part of the hobby that I didn't know I would enjoy. You know, I've built terrain for tournament play and things like that, but actually building something thematic and, you know, putting some creative energy into it as opposed to just putting a couple crumbled, ruined walls together was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you're not just looking to block line of sight or give somebody a cover save, you're actually trying to create part of the world that they're going to be exploring. It's a different proposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that then the Game Master range something that's going to continue to expand over time? Or is it sort of the various starter sets are more or less self-contained and these are just an intro for people?
I know that the sets, the starter paint sets, is something that we will continue to support, have the miniatures in it, because it's a great recruitment product. It speaks more to the RPG player. You know, army painting isn't what RPG players do. They paint characters.
Sure.
And those sets are an insane value. I mean, that the one set has 20 paints, 5 minis, and a brush, and it retails for $50 US, you know, $49.99. That's insane. So it's a great recruitment initiative. So I think that that's something that we'll continue to support. And, you know, in terms of the other aspects of Game Master, it's not on my radar right now. We're still, you know, knee deep in Fanatic to some degree. And we've always got our sights set on the next thing. So there are a couple things that we're working on. But to be honest, you know, Game Master's one that, you know, we're going to roll in some of the new Fanatic formula into those sets and hopefully have something in the next few months to bring out. As far as the terrain stuff, time will tell. I'm going to Denmark in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure that we'll be doing a lot of testing and theory crafting for sure.
Always good to find out whether or not there's going to be more things coming up over the horizon. Getting back to the paint then, the air range came out. Now, I got these back to front. I thought Speedpaint 1 came out before air, but then I pre-order everything, so
they're like 3 months away from each other. To be fair, like 3 or 4 months apart from each other.
Yeah. So when air came out, then with sort of a triad system in it, which was I can't remember the previous war paint system having set triads.
No, it did not. It's the first time we introduced triads into our range of products.
And obviously with the key behind the army painter getting stuff done quickly, triad systems are something that a lot of people use to really blitz through, being able to just grab specific colors, not have to worry about blending. You've got three bottles that your 3, you know, shade, mid, and highlight, and away you go. So replication repetition is taken care of. Obviously, that was a step away then from the war paints system by bringing that in. What was the design process like on that? Because prior, the war paints had primers, the colored primers, the spray primers that matched perfectly. In doing the air triad, did it mean you were having to start with specific colors that match the existing range, that you were going, well, this is going to be the mid-tone equivalent of this war paint, and then we need a shade and a highlight? Or was it just that would be too restrictive to try and color match across the range like that? We'll make this whole cloth.
That's essentially what we did. The story goes back to my first interview with Bo and Jonas, and I said, why aren't you guys doing an air range? Nobody's doing a true airbrush ready range on the market. And they both kind of said, meh, but they weren't airbrush painters. They were army painters that spray paint dipped done, that was their method. And a couple years into working with the company, Bo said, and Thomas and I worked together on Game Master and sat us down and said, okay, you guys are going to do an air range. What's it going to be? Tell us what's going to make this different. Why should people buy it? And, one of the first things, of course, was that it had to be airbrush ready purely right from the bottle. I had used other airbrush ranges in the past. I had worked for companies that made airbrush ranges, and they weren't, still required thinning. So that was goal number one, hurdle removed, number one for the customer who uses airbrushes or is getting started in airbrushes. And the next step is always, of course, what colors do I choose? Or I have trouble mixing colors because you mix white, and white is finicky to airbrush with, and so that's where the idea of doing triads. We were not the first company to introduce triads in miniature paint. We were the first, as far as I know, to introduce it in airbrush, where it really does make sense because of the way that you airbrush your miniatures. But you're exactly right. We looked at our range, and we wanted coverage, to fit within our 100% color match story. Using the same pigmentation in our aerosol color primer sprays, in our OG war paints range, and the airbrush range. So you'll see demonic yellow. It's going to be using the same pigment as demonic yellow in the sprays, as in the war paints range, as in the war paints Fanatic range now, in the airbrush range. And that's where we started. And as you said, we just went darker and brighter, with the exception of white and black, of course, because black and white are going to be your extreme ends, so your base and your highlight. And we worked out from there. It's exactly how it went, Gerry.
It's a beautiful range. Like I say, I pre-ordered it. And then when I got it, it was how quickly could I get it through an airbrush to try it. And I have a lot of miniatures from a lot of different companies and different genres, going the whole skew from sci-fi fantasy through to historic. So I paint everything, anything and everything ad hoc, depending on how I'm feeling. And it was interesting grabbing the air, because initially I thought, well, this will do me for fantasy, sci-fi games. But then after a while, I started experimenting with using them for historics. And there are some colors in there that are absolutely nailed on for certain things, whether it's a World War II webbing or a Napoleonic tunic, whatever it happens to be. But it's the diversity of the colors, and this comes through with Speedpaint as well. The initial Speedpaint run was relatively restricted to more sort of
colors,
poppy fantasy colors. But then Speedpaint 2.0 came along, and things like Gunner Camo and Burnt Moss came in. And
Mummified Grime is another good one for historics as well.
Oh god, yeah, it's a great olive drab. So when you're formulating a paint range, or when you're putting a paint range together, obviously the vast core audience is of a fantasy / sci-fi sort of bent. But do you find that the muted tones, the more historical tones, are starting to feature more than they used to? Or are people looking for things like that more? The constant quest for the proper color Feldgrau for German tunics is one that echoes across the internet and every paint range and forum I can see.
I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation. Even just this week, I've had this conversation, and I like to tell people, I live near the World War II Museum here in New Orleans. It's amazing if you ever have an opportunity to go. You could find my grandfather's brick that we had laid there with his name engraved on it, which is really cool. But you walk through this museum, and it's a theatrical experience. I believe Tom Hanks had like his production crew from Band of Brothers and Private Ryan, help to craft this. And you're literally walking through like movie sets. And you get to this one area where they've got a bunch of German uniforms, all in a big glass display, all from the same era. And they're all supposed to be, that German gray color. And they're all different. So I think it's I understand why historical painters want to have the most accurate color possible. But I also think that that's flawed in a weird way. I say that, full disclosure, nobody just like murder me on the internet. I don't want to get canceled for saying that to historical gamers, because I appreciate you. I've got a giant C-130 over there that I'm ready to paint. I can't wait. I love scale modeling too. But that's where there's, I like to say that we are a game company that makes paints. We don't make games, or we make paints for gaming. Whereas you see scale models tend to lean more towards, or I should say historical gamers tend to lean towards more scale model companies. There's a lot of paint brands that make paints for scale model that have crossover. So there is a push and a pull there. And we just happen to lean more into the sci-fi and fantasy worlds that we play in, right?
Yeah.
But there is a demand for it. And when Thomas and I sat down, we wanted to make sure that there was an element of coverage and inclusion for people that tended to go down the route of historical and scale more. You can see that in like the olive green triads and the neutrals, and even some of the grays and the desaturated blues throughout Warpaint's Air, Speedpaint, and the new Fanatic range. What we need to do is we need to have a historical lunatic fanatic out there that loves it, that will come and say, because it's not me and it's not Thomas, and our company may have grown, but we're not that big. But somebody who really understands and cares about it, that is willing to go ahead and say, okay, this would be a good one for, German tank Panzer gray, and this would be good for African Corps yellow, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that way we could do that across the range. I would happily supply some paints to somebody who could do that for me. Be willing to, but it would be a huge task, right? I mean, there's so much.
Well, yeah, you've got all of history and a little bit of prehistory to play in there as far as color matching specific things go. Good luck finding the right color purple for, the Trojans and their elite guard, or whatever it happens to be. Obviously, as you're saying, it's a small company, and there's just a couple of you working on development sometimes. But with the likes of Speedpaint 2.0, and then with the Fanatic range, you've brought in a lot of outside help from various members of the community. People will recognize from YouTube or from Instagram, painters of all sort of qualities or skill levels, shall we say, from people who do rough and ready, get armies on the table, but they're painting constantly, to the top-notch crystal brush Golden Demon winner. How did that come about, and where did the people get recruited in from?
So it's a great question to ask, and I actually think that we as hobbyists and companies need to be paying attention to relationships that brands have with content creators, because there's a lot of them out there that have relations that, it gets a little bit murky, is a good way of putting it, right? My approach has always been, be transparent, honesty, open, be vulnerable as a business. Don't be afraid to admit flaw. Don't be afraid to show the human side of your business. Because at the end of the day, we are passionate hobbyists, just like you and just like everybody that we met at Adepticon. It's actually interesting. It's a quick tangent, and I can go on a lot of them, but we did Danishes and demos, fun little play on word, but there were no good Danishes in Chicago, but we had donuts and coffee, and Thomas Bow and I did like a 3.5 hour demo where you could sit down, have a cup of coffee, play with the paints, and ask us questions about the development of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of questions about the technical properties of the paints and the color selection and things like that. And then there was a question from somebody in the back of the room, and he just said, "What made you want to do this?"
Hmm.
You know, and nobody had quite phrased it that way, but the way that I phrased it was, I'm a gamer. I've been playing tournaments for a long time. I was the coach of the U.S. national team. I've been in these halls playing games, for a long time. Same with Bo. Thomas, he goes to all the painting shows and painting competitions. His friends are the best painters in the world, right? So, of course, we want our friends to like the products that we make. We talked about this at the beginning of this little chat, about we're a niche market within a niche. Like, we already have that thing in common. Like, when I go to Adepticon, every person in there I know is somebody I can have a great conversation with about whatever games they saw, whatever games they demoed, whatever tournament they played in, whose classes they took, and you could talk it in. It sucks when the people that are your friends or potential friends don't like the work and the products, the work that you do and the products that you create. It's not a good feeling. Everybody likes to be liked. So we wanted to make paints that our friends liked. And in that regard, going back to your kind of initial question, by being transparent, bringing people behind the fourth wall, it's one thing for us as a brand to say, this is how we do things, and it's very easy for somebody to say, well, okay, but that's you telling me that. We can't bring every customer into our factory and see how we do things and make them fall in love with who we are just by hanging out with us. But maybe we can work with some of their friends and some of the people that they look up to and respect and admire. And that was the initial goal. And when I started working with the company again, it was social media, consumer marketing, and things of that nature. But it was also working with media and content creators and artists. And I've worked really hard to form bonds and relationships with these people and really know who they are off camera and off the screen. And it got to the point to where I thought maybe they could help us with the development, so that they could help us tell the transparent story and lend credibility to the work that we were doing. That was the initial intent with the product development team. But actually, as a part of that, Brent from Goobertown Hobbies, said this was too small of a pool. It needs to be much bigger. And I'm glad that he said that when he did, because that's when we were really starting to ramp up the testing for Warpaint's Fanatic, which was less publicized, in the production. I think you can see a lot of it in our content around the release, because there's a lot of faces and a lot of people that were involved and touched this product before release. But he said, it just needs to be bigger. There needs to be more people. So that's exactly what we did.
Bringing all those people in, then, were there comments and feedback that that they sort of gave you that changed the direction or changed particular choices that you had made that you probably wouldn't have thought of yourself?
That's a hard one. I don't know if there was anything that, like, everything was a guidance, because it kind of worked naturally. I mean, it wasn't linear, but it was progress, right?
Sure.
A good example, we invited Dana Howell to be a part of it, and she loved the old properties, the floating pigment that you can get with the old speed paints. It was coined reactivation. I don't like that term because it's not accurate, but it does explain what certain people experience was going on. But she liked the fact that it was almost like a watercolor that she could mix and blend and fade and glaze the way that she wanted to.
Yeah.
And we weren't certain that we were going to change the formula when Speedpaint 2 happened. Our goal was to go to 90 colors.
Yeah.
Right. Retailers wanted more. From the second we launched, retailers and customers says, okay, when are you doing more colors? So that was the goal. But because we were planning on adding to the range, we said, let's see if we can make this a more versatile paint. With Speedpaint 1.0, it did everything that we wanted it to do. We do believe, and I still stand by, that it was the best one coat painting solution on the market. But we heard from the customers that they didn't want just a one coat paint solution. They wanted it to be a base coat solution, a glazing, a filter product, right? So if we could make it versatile enough to meet the demands of every painter out there, but also retain the properties that we felt made Speedpaint unique, we were going to try it. But that's why we brought Dana on, because she loved those properties. And we knew that she would be really critical throughout the way. And if it could still work for her, then we felt that we had something. And I think, you know, there were a lot of things that came out, from color selection to how fast the paint dried, you know, certain things that came up in the testing when we made a change to the formulation that we probably wouldn't have seen if it was just Thomas, myself, and Bo. So it was great to just have another set of eyes on the product.
And I mean, you now have the sort of the factory team as well, a core of people that are working with you on a, I suppose, semi-regular basis. Is it then to help guide or steer some of the choices for the range and where the developments are going within it then? Yeah,
and it's also to tell unique and different stories in the community and in the industry. I come from a sports marketing background, and it's not uncommon for a golf brand to have a signature set of irons, right?
Sure.
That goes all the way back to Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer playing Tiger Woods. It's not uncommon when I was at Specialized Bicycles to have Ned Overend, the first world championship mountain bike racer in the world, in the history of mountain bike racing, to be a part of the development conversation for new mountain bikes. Why wouldn't you work with the experts in their field to provide feedback? But with that comes kind of a, you know, there's a risk involved, because you are really bringing somebody behind the curtain. So it had to be people with the paint development team, with the factory team, that we really trusted, people that we had relationships with. It's easy to say that with like the factory team and the development team, that we paid people to say nice things. That's the easy take on it, but that's not exactly what we wanted. We hired them to be honest. And with the factory team, the unique thing is that if you look at Sam, you look at guys like Adam, they'll straight up tell you that if Fanatic didn't exist, they couldn't be a part of this factory team, because they couldn't stand behind a product that they didn't use regularly. Note taken, right? And actually, that was kind of like when I started having these feeler conversations, because I wanted to have an actual professional team of people that we can go to events with, you know, and champion and be champions for us and champions for the hobby and community. This has been a years-long dream of mine. Seeing it come to fruition has been pretty incredible, especially last week. It was, the vibes were high, but, you know, they'll tell you firsthand that they couldn't have partaken in this if they didn't get behind the product. So for us, it's about changing and trying to bring positive advancements in the way brands work with content creators, artists, etc. Because like I said, it can get a little bit murky at times. And I think we should, you know, I like to think that we are leaders now. We're trendsetters in this industry. You can hear my dog in the background shaking it off. Sorry about that. But I think that this is one space where we can start the ball rolling forward in a new direction, to where it's not just affiliate programs and links for discounts. It's about making meaningful content, meaningful experiences for our fellow hobbyists.
Which is very cool. And as they always say, feedback is a gift.
Yeah.
So it's always good to see people from within the community getting involved and giving their 2 pence worth.
And we take it from the customers as well, Gerry. I mean, like we read every comment, and we have an email address. So if you're out there and you have an idea or a recommendation or a concern about the product, all you have to do is email it. It goes right to Bo, myself, and Thomas's inbox, feedback@thearmypainter.com.
Well, there you go. You can't say fairer than that now. So War Paints Fanatic then, the most recent challenge, shall we say, / release. 216 paints.
Yeah.
And it's a heck of a size of a thing. Not just triads, but quintuple, quintet,
sextuplet, something. I don't. It's
something like that. So it goes beyond the standard. Here's 3-color triad. It branches it into something closer to 5 or 6, allowing you to really break it down as much as you want. So who took on the challenge of this development? Because it's a mighty one to go, not just rejuvenate the war paints range, but to do it pretty much en masse, one go, one and done, in such a massive way.
Yeah. So when we started, obviously, I like to say that Warpaint's Air was a test for Thomas and I from Bo, and then Speedpaint, and then Speedpaint 2, and all the while we were working on Fanatic. And once we had nailed the formula, we had to just say, what is this range going to look like from a color perspective? And, you know, we worked not only with painters and artists and hobbyists to get feedback, we also worked with retailers to get their feedback. How many paints is too many paints? When does it get too redundant? When do you just have range fillers because you're trying to fill space on a rack to take up space on a retail floor, right? From our perspective, every square inch of that retail display that a retailer puts in their store should be profitable for them. But at the same time, what can we present that's different to the everyday hobbyist that makes painting more accessible and easier? Right off the bat, I think with the change to the formulation, being able to use those high coverage bases with the increased pigmentation, thanks to the stabilization technology, we have a paint that feels different and behaves different. Like, I think we genuinely have a different paint that for many hobbyists will be better. So we had established that, but what can we do next that's going to make painting faster, easier? Triads is something that we knew that we were going to do. But then we looked at the full color spectrum, and it's like, if we're doing just 3 colors each, for an airbrush, that makes sense because you get more of a transition of color because of the technique, because of the dispersion through the airbrush. With brush painting and traditional bristle brush painting, you don't get that. You need to make that on your own. So here what we did with the flexible triads is developed a family of colors that I can't remember. I think it's like, so it's 6 colors, and you can do, I have them right here behind you. Oh, there you go. So perfect. So if you just look at the orange in the center, because that's an easy one, you have 6 colors there, but really what you have is multiple triads. You can use molten lava to lava orange, burning ore to flickering flames, lava orange. You get where I'm going with that. But then you can also make jumps for more contrast, from molten lava to lava orange to glowing inferno, lava orange to glowing inferno to inner light, you know, however you see fit, depending on the miniature that you're painting, the style, your color preference. You know, I think that most gamers, like the hardcore tournament players that are highlighting up their models, they're usually going to use the 6th, the 3rd or 4th, and the 1st to get the most out of it and make the most impact visually. But it gives options, and it presents the colors in your range in a way that there's more uniformity, and it takes some of the decision paralysis as to what color should I choose out of the equation for the hobbyist.
And I mean, there are painters who have made sort of the triad technique famous, likes of Kevin Dallimore.
Of course.
The amount of miniatures that man can paint just by going for those high contrast jumps, this range sort of lends itself to beautifully. But then at the same time, having a graduated set of 6 means if you want to go for painting a large scale bust and you're looking for those subtle transitions between shades, they're all available as well. And it really lets you sort of pick and choose between the paints as to whatever your project in front of you currently is.
That's exactly right. We should just give a quick shout out to Kev Dallimore. And if you don't follow him on Facebook or Instagram, you should, and you should be ashamed of yourself for not following him, because he is an absolute living legend of a painter.
Yeah, especially if you can find Kevin Dallimore's painting guidebook, get that, and then pick up the Fanatics range and just go nuts with the triads, because he
basically be able to paint just like him. His
man's an absolute legend. Obviously, then the Fanatics range, you've got these sets of triads, but then there's also been a whole slew of effects, washes, and other technical paints that are a bit different coming in there.
Yeah. Then the metallics as well.
And the oh yes, the metallics.
So the washes are the low hanging fruit. We didn't change the formula. We added more colors. We shifted the color spectrum around a little bit to make it a more viable range in and of itself with 18 colors. So there's some really interesting ones in there. Magenta wash is like magenta tone is my favorite wash in the range. It's so versatile. I use it for a lot of skin tones, and it's a lot of fun to play with. The metallics actually had a change, Gerry, to where we use a combination of aluminum flake for coverage and sheen and traditional mica flake for color and reflexivity. There were some reviews saying, well, why would you make a better or a different metallic paint when you already have Speedpaint metallic and it's the best that's out there? Well, Speedpaint metallic is really good, but you can't dry brush with it.
No.
So having a heavier bodied metallic is important to have a complete range. So we see the Speedpaint range and Fanatic range working in unison, and you'll see more of that in some of the content, where with Fanatic, we really wanted to have that coverage and that ease of use for application. Working with things like Speedpaint, which is a more versatile product now, you can use it like an ink, you can use it as a one coat system, you can use it as a glaze or a filter as well, can help you to punch those colors up. And just do all kinds of things. But getting back to the auxiliary products in the range, metallics are really fun. Definitely, if you're going to try one or two, I highly recommend True Brass and Mithril. They're great colors. Death Metal is a good one as well, and it's unique. You don't find many metallics that shade out there.
I have to say, rough iron. People all need to own rough iron. Rough iron can be mixed with brass, can be mixed with gold, can be mixed with silver. That is,
it's a great base coat for all metallics.
Oh, it's amazing.
It gives you a nice dark base that still has the metal flake in it.
Yeah, I've got 3 pots because I never like to run out of it because I cry. Because it always
you would like death. You would like death metal then. I love
death metal, but I've not tried the paint yet. But with the range now and the various auxiliary products, does that mean that the Fanatic is complete and whole, or do you have plans to expand beyond what you already have, which is pretty much one of the most comprehensive paint lines I've ever seen dropped in one go?
People keep asking me what's next, and I say I hope it's not another paint line, because I feel like that's been my life for the past 4.5, 5 years. And I enjoy making paint, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of other things that I'd like to get to. But I think where we're at today, I think we have a complete range. Is it perfect? No paint range is ever perfect. But what I do know is that where we are positioned today is that we are flexible, adaptable, and if we see that there's a gap somewhere, that's something that we can address. But we do put a lot of thought and effort into the range, as I said, from a product viability standpoint and also the retail viability standpoint. With all the paint brands popping up, left and right today, what retailer can sell 400 SKUs from one paint vendor?
Yeah.
Like, that's just not realistic. And who needs that many paints? I still think 216 is a lot, but when you think about that, there's 18 metallics, 18 FX paints, 18 washes, and it feels a little bit better, but it's a lot of paint. It's a lot of colors. So, never say never, Gerry. Maybe there's some things on the table and some things to be explored. I mean, you see us dabbling a little bit with texture and that effects range.
Yeah.
And maybe that's room for us to explore. Quick shade dip has been quick shade dip. It's our, probably not our best selling product. It's it's definitely a dated technique, but it's our history. It's like literally runs in our company DNA and bloodline. But I think that maybe someday down the road, that's something that we could revisit. But right now, I'm just really having fun playing with the paint.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You say that you're having fun playing with the paint, which is obviously the most important thing to do. Is not just create the lines, but actually go ahead and do stuff with it. Yeah. And if people aren't aware, if they go over to the armypainter.com, There's been some interesting bits and pieces popping up recently.
Oh, yeah.
The one I'm keeping an eye on is the Arena of Escalation.
Yeah.
Where, well, I'll let you talk about it, but essentially a group of you are painting armies over the next sort of 9 months. So not a quick build, a long, slow burn to actually show people what it takes to put armies on the table.
Yeah, I mean, while we paint armies fast, and Thomas could, I mean, I've literally watched him paint a Necron army in like 3 hours, few thousand points, and it looks incredible. I think it got him accepted into SM Battle Report's No Retreat, and it took him no time to paint. He's an absolute magician. I guess it was kind of inspired by Dave Taylor and Jake at the Build Paint Play podcast, and their Tale of Four Warlords a little bit, but also we've been so invested in new releases, and also like a lot into RPG recently. I wanted us to get back to our roots, and that's army painting and gaming, and just started as a personal challenge with some colleagues, and then we expanded from there. And you know, I felt it was a good opportunity for us that have been doing this a long time to educate some that are newer to it. And also, I mean, we have I believe 2 people that are participating in the arena that have never done army building or painting before. So you're gonna see a range of technique and capability from somebody who's beginning to somebody like Bo, who's just been army painting, who's an absolute wizard of color combination, to, you know, myself, who's a little more advanced than that, and then Thomas, who's just, I mean, his armies can be in any magazine. They're just gorgeous. And I think that you're going to see that our products really lend themselves to all different skill types throughout this process. And the way that we use those products might be different between everybody who's participating. But most of all, what I'm really looking forward to is that we get to document this and share this with our customers. And you know, my hope is that maybe some people will play along at home and try and meet those deadlines with us. But what I'm really, really excited about is I want to have a tournament at Christmas time. And I'm definitely going to write missions that are totally skewed against Bo, that make it very difficult for him to win, no matter who he's playing. There might be some hijinks and shenanigans, and that'll make for a really good time.
That's always a good way. We ran a 40K campaign weekend up at OnTableTop, and I wrote the scenarios. However, the games were being played on different tables, and scenario objectives could trigger underground Necron facility. So you might claim an objective on your table and then all of a sudden cause a bubble that froze every model in time and space on another table. And they hated that. But I enjoyed myself so much.
It's like when you're a tournament organizer for something like that, it's almost like you are the dungeon master for, you know, I
was more like, to be fair, I was much more like Venger than the dungeon master.
Actually, you could see this is my army right there for the arena back there. I haven't had much progress lately, but we're getting there.
We'll look forward to the next updates coming soon then. There's also obviously the Army Painters sort of Academy, the bits and pieces you do on YouTube, which people, if you're not subscribed to the Army Painter YouTube channel, I'd be absolutely flabbergasted, but there's some stunning stuff on there from, again, doing the how can I paint an entire board game or army to the sort of top quality level painting that you would see from some of the top painters in the world. One came out recently where somebody was painting Imperial Fists, or everybody's favorite Custard Marines. In fact, 2 people were painting them. And this, I think, shows the complementary nature of the range that's being developed by the Army Painter now, because it goes everything from the quick speed paint route to airbrushing, color primers, or the traditional layering effect. And it's fascinating watching the artists bounce back and forward in some cases, even though they happen to be doing maybe the layering technique. Then it's, well, you know what I can do? I can use speed paints here to get contrast, or I can use it to get a form of a wash over the miniatures. And I think this shows that nothing exists in a vacuum. No. The videos show that the ranges can be mixed and matched, and really the only thing you need to think about is what tool do you need to unlock the potential in front of you.
That's exactly it. You know, for many painters, paint is a religion. You know, they're a follower of one thing, and that's totally cool. You know, I think it's actually kind of funny in hindsight that we say that, and we've got a paint range named Fanatic.
Well, yeah.
But you know, really, paint is a tool, and there's going to be colors that work for you. And we always say, like, my story with Fanatic is that there's winners and losers in every paint range. Some paint ranges have more winners than others, and some paint ranges have more losers than the others. I think with Fanatic, what we did is we took our winners, made them a little bit better, and then really brought everything else up. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a tool. And if you like a color, it should work for you. And you shouldn't have to figure out how to work a new paint because the color from one brand didn't work and you need to go to another one. But the reality is it's just a tool. You got to use what works for you. Hopefully ours should work for you. Because I want more than anything for people to like the work that we do. You know what I mean? But get out there and play with them. That's the most important thing. Find out what works for you.
There we go. That is the most important thing. Hopefully you found that interesting, folks. If you've any questions about the Army Painter range in any of its myriad forms, please feel free to drop them below or to email Adam directly. He already gave you the email if you were paying attention. Otherwise, you can scrub back and find it. It's been great fun sitting down, having a chat with you. Hopefully we'll get to do this again soon and see where the Army Painter is taking us next. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.